Okay, so this evening you'll notice the layout of the hall is different. We're going to have a ritual this evening. We're usually once during each series and often at the end of the series we'll have a ritual to mark the end of the series and to engage our emotions, not just our heads, but to engage our emotions with the content of the material we've been looking at. So we've been looking for the past few weeks at the mind training, the 7-point mind training tradition. And so this evening we're going to be doing a ritual devoted to that. And I introduced that text a few weeks ago and described it as a form of alchemy, spiritual alchemy. And alchemy is an ancient practice where you take base metal, worthless base metal, and transform it into valuable gold. And mind training is about transforming the base metal of our everyday emotions and life and experience and turning it into the spiritual gold of an enlightened mind. And in alchemy, we use the crucible to melt and transform the metal. And in mind training, we use the crucible and intensity of our daily life, the day-to-day life and the intensity of that. And then we use that to transform our current selves, our current emotions, into the emotions of an enlightened being. So mind training is really relevant for us because it involves practicing in the midst of a busy life, which we all have. So if we think we can only practice when we're in ideal conditions, we can just, most of us will have very little time to practice. Or if we try and put Buddhism off to the future when our life's more settled, we will never get around to it. And mind training says we use the intensity and the adversity of everyday life to practice. And the kind of mind that we're training, the kind of mind that we're trying to cultivate is the mind of a bodhisattva. And the mind of the bodhisattva, you could say, is the ideal Buddhist. It's a Buddhist who all of their energies are devoted to enlightenment, but not just for themselves, but to liberate all beings. And it's an ideal that we aspire towards. It can seem like quite a daunting ideal, but it's a very beautiful ideal, and for me a very motivating ideal, that our life is dedicated to practice to liberate all beings, alleviate the suffering of all beings. So that's the mind training is trying to train us in a more compassionate mind, a less selfish mind, and a more compassionate mind, a wiser mind as well, and ultimately the mind of a bodhisattva. But for us it might just mean being more kind, more generous, a bit less selfish. The next step towards that that's what we're training our mind in. The Buddha said suffering is caused by being obsessed with ourselves, and the bodhisattva ideal and mind training turns out the other way around and say, well, let's become concerned with other people. Let's train our mind to reach out to other people and to be more about other people. Yeah, and it's said that the bodhisattva becomes a bodhisattva when particular conditions arise, when within them arises the mind of a Buddha. It's called the bodhicitta, the enlightened mind. And that arises in particular conditions, and mind training tries to create the conditions for that to arise, the awakened mind, the enlightened mind, the mind of a bodhicitta. And puja is also a practice where we try and create the conditions for the arising of that mind within us, training ourselves in the mind of a bodhisattva for the bodhicitta to arise. And you could say that mind training and puja are both practices where we're kind of playing at being a bodhisattva. It might seem like a very distant ideal, a very far off ideal, but I've got 2 children, other people might have, and you can probably remember being children yourself. We kind of imagine we're something and we play at it, and it's a way of kind of testing it out and cultivating that as well. And so maybe we could say, well, we're kind of playing at having that mind of a bodhisattva. What would that be like to care about other people so much and want to alleviate their suffering, to have that kind of wisdom and compassion? And so when we chant the verses the mind training verses, the text is quite pokey and can seem quite radical. And it might seem beyond us, but we can imagine, well, what might it be like just to play with that idea and try that out? Some of the verses in the text. And similarly, in the verses of the puja, we're going to be chanting verses that might seem like beyond where we are now, and that's partly the point. We're kind of aspiring to something that is beyond us now, but you could say, well, we're kind of trying out those ideas and playing at being a bodhisattva. If that works for you, you can think of it in that way. So it's a very high ideal, but it's very potent as well. Mind training is a way of transforming our mind in day-to-day life in a very practical and potent way. Excuse me, I've got a bit of a sore throat and chest this evening, so hopefully that will, my voice will last for the puja. So Vedanya gave a talk a few weeks ago where he mentioned the 5 forces which come from the mind training, or mentioned in the mind training tradition. And Vedanya said often, loads of us have good intentions, but it can be very difficult to follow through with them and see them through and to put them into practice. And part of that is we forget, and part of that is that it gets tough and we give in because our emotions aren't really behind it. We're not really wholeheartedly behind it. We're not fully committed to it. So what we need to do is to both remind ourselves and remember our commitments and get our emotions on board and behind them. Vedanya talked about the 5 forces as a really practical way to do both of these things. So first I'm going to talk about the force, remind you about the force of familiarization. I'll familiarize yourself, you guys, with the force of familiarization. I'll remind us about that. So yeah, often one of the reasons we don't see through our good intentions is we just forget about it. And mind training tries to get us to remember all the time what our purpose is, what our life is about, what our purpose is about, what we're trying to do with our life. And it uses slogans to do this. And we've seen some of these over the past few weeks, but there's quite a lot we haven't encountered, and we'll encounter some of those this evening. So these slogans condense, you could say, the whole of Buddhism or the whole of mind training into like a few words, and they're quite specific to particular aspects of mind training. And we've also talked about the worldly winds, the 8 worldly winds that blow us about and that inflate our ego and we chase after. So there's praise and blame, loss and gain, fame and infamy, and pleasure and pain. And we can get buffeted around by these. And the slogans in mind training just point at one of these. It might be the one that we need to work on right now. And they give us like a really short and pithy, powerful, potent way to remember what we're trying to be doing. So I'll read some of them out, if I can find that bit of paper. So some of them focus on the kind of positive, loving heart that we're trying to cultivate. So some of the slogans from mind training, we've encountered one of them: be grateful to everyone. Another one says, always have the support of a cheerful mind, which I really like. Imagine if you just kept that to heart and always remember to have a cheerful mind. And what an impact you'd have on the people around you and how much better your life would be. So that, I mean, just, you know, might just end the talk there. Always have a cheerful mind. The end. But it goes further than that. Some focus on the worldly winds and the particular ones. So we might be all about blaming other people. And we heard Sangha say, well, gather all blame onto one. Don't blame other people. Blame our ego. Blame our selfishness. That's why we're suffering. Gather all blame onto one. Another slogan: don't think about others' faults. Work on your strongest disturbing emotion first. Don't get excited by cutting remarks. So if you're someone who's irritable, gets angry, or pride gets dented, you feel blamed, don't get excited by cutting remarks. And if that's something that you're prone to, just remember that slogan and have it in your mind. Don't hold grudges. I think that's one I could work with. Don't hold grudges. Don't offend others. Just be aware of the impact of your actions on other people. Don't compete. Like 2 words, you can remember that. Don't compete. Don't be irritable. It's not complicated. Just 3 words. Don't be irritable. And just stamp that onto your heart and in your mind. Pin it on your mirror. Put it on your desk. Get your phones. Put a reminder in your phone that comes up. Don't be irritable. So mind training is very, very practical and direct. And just get these slogans, boil it down to a few words that you can remember, and then really take that to heart and act on it. Some more. Don't make a fuss. Very practical. Don't make a fuss. Don't expect thanks, which really looks at our motivation. Why are we doing something? Is it because we want to receive praise? Don't expect thanks. You might, just do something good for somebody else, just for the sake of it. Don't expect thanks. And then some of them focus on the wisdom perspective. Satyajyoti talked last week about the wisdom perspective, and we heard about the slogan, see all dharmas as dreamlike. And then there's another wisdom slogan about the importance of conditions, seeing the importance of conditionality and conditions in our life. And it says, give up poisonous food. That sounds curious, but for me, it's talking about what do we pour into our consciousness? Paying attention. I've heard Padmavajra use the phrase, the ecology of the mind, looking after the pollution in our own consciousness. What is it that we pollute our consciousness with? Is it social media? Is it the news? Is it box sets? Is it alcohol? What is it that we pollute our consciousness with it? And this slogan simply says, give up poisonous food. Basically just consume that which is going to nourish us and make us healthier and stronger. So just 4 words: give up poisonous food. So these slogans condense mind training, particular aspects of it that might be relevant to you, into just a few words that you can memorise, take to heart, and just try and remember. So that's the force of familiarisation, so that we don't forget our purpose and can really, quite powerfully carry the mind training about with us in just a few words. I'm just going to have a sip of water, so bear with me. Okay, so one problem with our good intentions would be that we just forget about it. So the slogans are really good for that. Another problem could be that the going gets tough and we give up. It's just really hard to try and practice in this way, to try and train our mind in this way is really challenging. So, it gets tough, we give up. So what we need to do there is to get this message that we really value and see as beautiful, and get it to penetrate into the whole of our being, get all of our energies, all of our emotions on board and behind it, so that when the going does get tough, we're motivated to carry on, and we really care and really value about this ideal and this project of transformation, so we don't give up. So we get our emotions behind and on board what we're doing. And so the other forces involve that. And puja, devotional practice, is a big part of this. Devotional practice involves getting the message through to our depths, to our deeper energies and emotions. I think I'm going to get the water hasn't worked. I'm going to go for the throat sweet now. So bear with me. This is tactic number 2, the Jake Cummins throat sweet. It always works. So you could also say puja is playing at being a bodhisattva. Like I said earlier, we're chanting verses which communicate and give expression to the kind of heart and mind of a bodhisattva. And that's not our heart and mind. We can be honest about that, but we're aspiring to that and moved and motivated by that. So you could see that the puja has been heart training. Not, we've got mind training. This is heart training, training our heart. But the word that's used is chitta, which means mind and heart. Buddhism doesn't really separate between the mind and heart. But you could see puja as being training our heart, our deeper emotions and energies. Getting the whole of us engaged on board with this Dharma project. And the 7 stages of the puja involve 7 different emotions of the bodhisattva. And if we cultivate those really, really, in a really focused way, that they create the conditions for this heart and mind of a bodhisattva, the bodhicitta, to arise within us. So we've talked about the force of familiarization, and there's 4 other forces, and they occur within the ritual this evening, within the puja. So the first force is, I can't remember the way Vedanya described them, but it's desire, it's chanda, it's really wanting what you set your mind upon. So if our heart's not really in it, whatever it is we set about to do, we're not going to succeed. So mind training says, well, get your heart involved, get your heart into it, and you need to really cultivate desire for what you set your mind upon. So the puja begins with verses of praise to the enlightened mind, to the bodhicitta. And for you could substitute that for whatever the next step is for you, whatever it is you're focused on, whatever you value. But we're praising that and imagining all the beautiful things in the world and offering those for us, the enlightened mind, but it might be something slightly different for you. And then there's the force of destruction, and we have a stage of confession of faults where we, in a way, try and abandon and let go of and destroy the things that are obstacles to us, ethical obstacles, that where our ego gets in the way, where our selfishness gets in the way, and we're unskillful. So we have a stage of just acknowledging that to ourselves and ultimately looking to destroy that. And Vedanya talked about the force of the white seed, which is a really skillful, meritorious act that is done as an offering to whatever it is we're wanting to, in dedication to whatever we want to bring about. And in the puja, that's done on steroids, kind of, in a way. We dedicate. It's the most skillful intention that is possible, is to dedicate any merits to the benefit of all beings, to the alleviation of the sufferings of all beings. You could see that is the force of the white seed that really really meritorious state of mind we're looking to cultivate. And then Bodhinaga talked to us about the force of what he called aspirational prayer, the force of devotion. And he said when we've done it, Bodhinaga invented something called an urban retreat, which kind of spread across Triratna, and it involved using these 5 forces. And he invited people to try them out, but he was a bit worried about the aspirational prayer, whether people would get freaked out by that. But when he got feedback at the end, he said that was the bit people found the most powerful and potent. And it involved a mantra of Green Tara, chanting the mantra of Green Tara and evoking the compassion that Green Tara represents through the form of mantra, and asking for help, in a way, asking for help from something outside of us, invoking that. And he described that as aspirational prayer or devotion. So it can help to relate to an embodiment of the enlightened mind rather than this abstract idea of the enlightened mind we're trying to cultivate. It can help to imagine that embodied in a form. So we have these archetypal Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, and this evening we're going to have a puja dedicated to Green Tara, who's on the shrine in the centre here, an embodiment of compassion. And it said that Tara was born mythically from the tears of Avalokiteshvara, the Buddha of compassion, as he wept for the suffering of all beings. So Tara is a response from Avalokiteshvara of seeing of his compassion. Tara was born, and she's quite an active, she's standing up and she's stepping out into the world as a response to suffering. So Tara represents the aspect of the enlightened mind which is compassionate and wants to respond to suffering in the world. And Tara is said to be the most accessible of all the bodhisattvas. She won't mind if you get the mantra wrong. She won't mind if you forget about your intention, your good intention, and she won't mind. She wants you to succeed, and she's on your side. And she's a bodhisattva figure associated with fearlessness. So she has her hand in the gesture of fearlessness. So she can give us confidence in our aspirations. So we're going to chant the Green Tara mantra later. And you could experiment with this idea, what does it feel like to ask for help from something outside of us? And Bodhinaga said, if you're worried about the theology, just put that to one side and just see what it's like. What is it like to ask for help, invoke help from something outside of us? And the enlightened mind isn't in our experience at the moment, so it's going to seem alien to us. It's going to seem outside of us when the enlightened mind, if it arises within us. So yeah, you could see it as something from inside yourself, something outside of yourself. You're free to relate to it in whatever way works, but for a lot of people, cultivating that devotion in a ritual way helps to get your emotions and your energies on board, and it communicates something in a deep way, a powerful way to your whole being. So you could say that Green Tara, is the patron saint of mind training. And there's a backstory that I talked about in the first week of the series of Atisha. Atisha was the Indian teacher associated with the origins of mind training, starting to spread mind training in Tibet. And mind training now is commonplace in all the different schools of Tibet, and it's gone beyond that now. And it originated, mind training, in a way, goes back to the Buddha. If you read some of the earliest Buddhist texts, like the Dharmapada, it's a mind training text, just in slightly different words. But it said that at the time there's a place called the Golden Isle, Serling, which Indonesia, I've forgotten where that would be nowadays, Indonesia. There was a famous teacher called Dharma, and it said that Atisha had a vision while he was in Bodh Gaya, and we've got an image of the Buddha under the Bodhi tree at Bodh Gaya here tonight. Atisha had a vision that he had to go to Indonesia and learn the mind training tradition from Dharma. So he had a very long, dangerous journey. He spent 12 years studying it, brought it back, became quite famous in India as someone who could teach the mind training tradition. And it said that Atisha was then in his 50s. He was invited by the king of Tibet to travel to Tibet to take the mind training tradition there. And he was in two minds because it was quite a dangerous journey. He was getting older. Tibet wasn't an easy place to be. And he was in two minds about whether to do that, apparently. And it said he had a Green Tara appeared to him, either in meditation or a dream, told him that he needed to go to Tibet to teach the mind training tradition. Apparently Green Tara also told him it would shorten his life if he did go to Tibet, He would shorten his life by 12 years. So having had this vision of Green Tara, a teacher travelled to Tibet and started to communicate and pass on the mind training teachings. And it was put down into writing about 100 years later after a teacher died, and that's the version of the text that we've been looking at, the 7 points of mind training. So Green Tara, you could say, is responsible for us knowing about the mind training tradition. So Green Tara has been involved from the outset. Yeah, so we've got this 5th force of aspirational prayer. And what I'd like us to do tonight, so we're going to do 2 things this evening. What we're going to do is engage with the slogans of mind training. So, what I'd like us to do in the discussion groups is to think about, what would a slogan be? What would a good slogan be for me? What do I need to remember about my Dharma practice? And how could I put that into just a few words that I could really remember and live by and take to heart and remind myself of? And what we've got is some little cards, blank slogan cards and pens in each of the rooms. So we're going to go off into groups for a little while and just invite you to think, well, what is it that you need to work on and remember? And then how are you going to put that into like a really catchy slogan that you will remember and remind yourself of? So we're going to engage with the slogans in that way this evening. And then also during the ritual, during the puja, we've got bowls with kind of very small green scrolls, the colour of Green Tara. And they've got some of those mind training slogans, traditional ones that I read out. And during the puja, we'll receive one of those. You can take one of those and get a precept of the Lama, a precept which is just right for you. But we'll do that during the ritual. And in the groups, I want us to think of your own slogan that is applicable, specific to what you need to work on. And during the puja, we can place that on the shrine and ask for that to be blessed. And it's a ritual way of getting more power behind that, more energy behind that, more emotion behind that. Is there anything else to say now? No. So I think that's what. So next we're going to our discussion groups. Excuse me. And if you, in one of the new groups, so there's a Wednesday group in the green room, the red room with Paranita, and Feti will be in the green room with the Munda group. And it's a chance also, just if you've got any burning questions ahead of the ritual, you can ask those in the group. But make sure you, if you can, come with a slogan written down that you can use in the ritual. If you want to be in a men's group, go in the library. If you want to be in a women's group, go in the bookshop. And if you want to be in a mixed group, you can stay in the Great Hall and groups will be worked out. So we'll have about 25 minutes or so in our groups, and then we'll come back and I'll explain what will happen in the ritual back up here after that. Okay.